What's up, everybody? How's it going? So, a few weeks ago, Amazon announced that it was going to revert its remote work policy. So starting in January 2025, all of its employees are going to have to go back to the office 5 days a week, at least as a sort of like baseline. There might be some exceptions, but overall, it's back in the office. And as you might imagine, this sort of announcement was met with dismay and panic and a lot of criticism from the industry, particularly software engineers. And so in this video, I want to kind of talk about remote work and where I think it's going. Fortunately, I think it's kind of over for the remote work era. But to understand why that's what I think, let's look at the facts, okay? So fact number one, remote work was never really a thing before the pandemic. The grand majority of companies did not have any sort of remote work policy, certainly not an established one. Like sometimes you could, stay home for a day or two and work from home, especially as a software engineer, because, you had a lot of power as a software engineer in the last 5 years, but it was not like an official thing. And in fact, the few companies that had full remote work were like extreme outliers. They were kind of like, weirdos amongst other companies. The most notable one that I can think of that had full remote work before the pandemic was a company called GitLab. And yeah, they were just a complete outlier. And to be clear, they were not like a very large company. It wasn't like a FANG type company because I think remote work, lent itself much more to smaller companies. But even within smaller companies, most of them, as soon as you had like an MVP or a tiny bit of revenue, you found some sort of office space, whether it was like a co-working space like, WeWork or working out of a garage or something. Most companies did have an office. An exception probably was companies that could not have an office. So for example, my company, AlgoExpert, when we started, my co-founder lived across the United States from me. He lived in California. I was in New York, so we never had an office. We were remote. And then we realized it worked for us, so we stayed remote. By the way, if you're a software engineer preparing for technical interviews, definitely check out my company, AlgoExpert. We've got the best software engineering interview prep for all specializations. Go to algoexpert.io and use the promo code CLEM, C-L-E-M, for a discount on the platform. Now, fact number two is that remote work became a thing because of the pandemic. It was triggered by the pandemic, nothing else. Even though after it was triggered, companies started to look into it and realize, maybe there's something there. Maybe we should adopt remote work, like regardless of the pandemic. But the point of the matter is that it was triggered by the pandemic because no one could actually be in office. We were imposed remote work. And that is a very important distinction. Like, this is not something, it's not a policy that companies just decided to adopt. They were forced to adopt it, okay? Now, fact number three is that remote work works, especially for white-collar jobs where you're sitting at a computer all day long, like software engineering, marketing, things like biz development or financial analysts, whatever. It works. Like, you can do your job at home. And, we know it better than anybody else as software engineers. Like, just give us a computer and maybe a pair of headphones if we like to listen to music while coding, and we can do our job, okay? It works. There's no question about it. There's nothing intrinsic to the office that enables us to do our work or to do it dramatically better. If anything, there's no real difference at the end of the day. Now, fact number four is that there are actually a lot of pros to remote work. Not only does it work, but there are a lot of pros. Now, most of these pros are to the benefit of the employee, but they're really big pros, really big benefits. For example, no more commuting. Commuting is such a negative aspect of life, especially for those who have long commutes. Some people have an hour-long commute. Some people have even more, and then at that point you're just choosing to hurt yourself if you have more than an hour-long commute. But the point is, commuting sucks. And if you can eliminate commuting altogether, which you can with remote work, amazing benefit. Then another benefit is that with remote work, you can work from anywhere you want, assuming that your company allows you from a sort of legal point of view. You can work from places that you might not have been able to otherwise because there's no office there, right? You can work from anywhere in the United States if you're employed by a United States company, or perhaps you can work in some, exotic location by the beach. That's a really cool perk. Another perk is that you have a lot more freedom, right? You can book more like, everyday appointments or, put the gym into your schedule more easily, things like that, because you're in the comfort of your own home. And on the topic of the comfort of your own home, remote work makes work a bit less like work and more like fun or leisure because you're at home. You're not in an office. You can kind of dress or look however you want. You don't need to like look presentable and things like that. Now, of course, we can talk about some of the psychological negatives of that last point, but here I divagate. The point is there are clearly a lot of pros and benefits to remote work that all fall on the employee. Now, fact number 5 is that there are also a lot of cons to remote work. And surprise, surprise, these cons are kind of going to fall mostly on the company. Okay. Con number 1 is that a lot of companies, particularly big companies, have invested a lot of time, energy, and most importantly, money in offices. Right? Here I'm thinking especially the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks of the world. They have these giant sprawling campuses that they've invested like billions of dollars in, and they don't want to see it to go to waste. Now, of course, you might argue, well, sunk cost fallacy, get over it. You better cut your losses now, but still, you can understand that for them, this is a con. They don't want to see that go to waste. Now, the second con is that there are a few things that I think we can all agree, even those who are pro-remote work, there are a few things that are objectively bad about remote work. For example, it's much harder to onboard a new teammate. It's harder to establish those initial sort of connections with them, show them how to to get their devs set up and, establish and all that. That's just harder. Meetings are a little bit harder. Yes, you can do them on Zoom or Google Meets or whatever, but, there's such a thing as Zoom fatigue, and sometimes it's nicer to talk to someone in person. And then the third con, which is perhaps a little bit more subjective, is that con of, there is some sort of, magic or positive about in-person interactions. Companies like Amazon, they said it in their message, in order to foster the culture that we want to foster and, enable the creativity that we're known for, blah, blah, blah. We believe that being in person, conversations, it's always hard to define, but we all kind of know that there's a little bit of truth to it. There's something about being in person that's maybe a little bit better. Okay, even if you disagree, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And at the end of the day, that is a con in the eyes of the companies. And the fourth big con about remote work, and this one is probably going to ruffle feathers, but let's be honest, is that companies lose almost all control over their employees, and that is not a good thing for them. Let's be honest. Why? Because remote work can be very, very gamed. It's very easy to game the system. It's very easy to do no work when you're working from home. Again, let's be honest. I know some of you are going to say, no, but you have to trust your employees or you have to empower them and everything. Okay, sure, that works great if everybody is super duper ethical. And unfortunately, there are some people who are not. And even within those people who are ethical, look, it's just very easy when you're at home to say, you know what, I'm going to clock off at 3 p.m. and I'm going to go to the gym early today. And I'll just text on Slack at 4:30 that I'm still working, Or it's very easy for some people to legitimately do no work. Look at the amount of people on Blind who have said that they were juggling 5 different remote jobs, getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars from each job, despite doing nothing because they were gaming the system. If it's easy to game the system as an in-person employee, which it kind of is, there are a lot of people in these big tech companies that are, vest and rest, just coasting and all that, you can imagine how it is with remote work. And so this brings us to fact number 6, which is the reality of the matter. Okay, when you look at the previous 5 facts, right, remote work was never a thing. Then remote work was forced onto us because of the pandemic. No one actually decided, or very, 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 very few companies decided, you know what, we're going to be remote now, okay? It was forced onto us. It works, but the pros almost entirely fall on the employees and the cons almost entirely fall on the companies. And what does that lead to? That leads to fact number 6, the reality of the matter, which is that it is in the best interest of the companies to not have remote work or full remote work. And this is why I think you're seeing Amazon revert its policy. And this is why, unfortunately, I think that most companies, if they haven't already, are going to follow suit. And again, like a lot of other companies, Amazon is actually not the first. They got the huge backlash, like, oh, draconian amongst big tech. But like, look at Meta. Meta is already back to sort of hybrid model where you have to be in office 3 days a week. From what I've heard from a firsthand source at Meta, you have to be in office 3 days a week, unless you have like a very specific situation and exception and everything. But 3 days a week in office, that already eliminates a lot of the perks of like a remote work policy. It goes back much closer to how it was before the pandemic, where there was no remote work, but you could get, the odd exception, then to full remote work. Suddenly, you can't live anywhere you want, right? Suddenly, you still got to commute 3 days out of the week. So the point of the matter is that I think this is the new reality. And also, I guess, like, why is it the new reality? Because now companies are back to having the power. For the last 5 years, the demand for software engineers far exceeded the supply, right? Low interest rates, tech bubble, we know the story. And so, it was very easy as an employee or as a group of employees to say, hey, company, if you don't give us remote work, we're going to resign, quiet resignation, and we're going to go get a job across the door from the company that does give us remote work. But now, we're no longer in that environment. Now, the employees who are going to want to quit after Amazon's announcement, they can. But first of all, my guess is not many of them are going to do so because it's rough out there. Quitting a job over remote work might not be feasible. You might be like, I need a job, right? And I can't get one anywhere else. And if they still decide to quit, Amazon might be like, well, that was kind of our plan after all along because we just didn't want to incur the costs of layoffs. So we're going to do like employee-triggered layoffs by telling them they have to come back to the office. So anyway, that's just like my thoughts on the matter. I'm really not like imparting my own, I'm not trying to like, to give my own analysis of whether I think that's a good thing or not. I'm just saying like the facts of the matter and that it is a thing, Believe me, remote, I love remote work. I've been remote with Algo Expert for, since the very beginning. So I totally get it. But unfortunately, I think if you're working for another company right now, particularly mid to large sized, if you haven't already gone back to the office, you're probably going to have to soon, and you're just going to have to accept that this is like the new norm for at least, the foreseeable future. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know what your company does if you're working right now. Like, is your company still remote first? Is it no longer remote first? Is it like hybrid, like Meta? Don't forget to smash the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter if you enjoy short form written content. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video.